All right, so today we're gonna take a deep dive into the relationship between Israel and Iran.
Okay.
And you gave me this piece to read by Mohammed al-Arshani. It's called "The Balance of Deterrence Between Israel and Iran,"
Mm.
and it focuses on this policy of carrot and stick in controlling escalation.
Okay.
Um, and one of the things that really caught my eye is this idea of these unspoken understandings between the two countries,
Yeah.
which is fascinating to me because it's almost like, you know, they're both playing from the same playbook, but nobody's actually written the playbook down.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like a shadow diplomacy, right?
Yeah.
They're operating under these certain rules of engagement, but they're never explicitly stated.
Right. And like a referee is kind of needed in this situation, and it seems like the U.S. is playing that role.
Yeah, the U.S. is definitely a key player in all of this.
So I'm really interested to kind of unpack how this all works.
Sure.
So first of all, just to give our listeners a little bit of context, what exactly do we mean by these unspoken understandings?
Well, it's like you said, it's this kind of unwritten agreement between these two countries where certain actions are tolerated while others trigger a response.
Okay.
And it's all about maintaining this delicate balance of deterrence to prevent things from escalating into a full-blown war.
So like a high-stakes chess match, but played in the shadows.
Exactly. Yeah, there are rules, there are moves that you can make and moves that are completely off limits.
So give me some examples from this article that al-Arshani points out.
Well, he points out that Israel targets Iran's allies in places like Lebanon and Syria and Iraq.
Right.
But there's a line that they don't cross, and that's Yemen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they don't touch the Houthis in Yemen.
Yeah, they seem to be untouchable in this game.
Why is that? Why do you think that distinction exists?
Well, it all comes down to threat perception, I think.
Okay.
You know, the U.S. and Israel, they view Hezbollah, which is right on Israel's doorstep,
Right.
as a much more direct and immediate threat. And so taking them down a peg or two, even with these targeted strikes, is part of this unspoken agreement.
So it's almost like Iran can kind of play its power game
Mm-hmm.
in other parts of the region as long as it doesn't directly threaten Israel.
Right. It's a delicate balancing act.
It's like, don't poke the bear, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where the carrot and stick approach comes in.
Oh, right. He mentions that quite a bit in the piece.
Yeah, it's this classic strategy of mixing threats with potential rewards to try to keep Iran in line.
So you threaten the hammer,
Right.
but you also dangle a juicy carrot in front of them.
Yeah, classic diplomacy.
How does that actually play out, though?
Well, the stick is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's the threat of the U.S. crippling Iran's nuclear and military ambitions.
Okay.
If they step out of line too far.
So that's the stick. What about the carrot?
The carrot is a little bit more nuanced.
Okay.
We're talking about potential concessions in a future nuclear deal, or maybe even turning a blind eye to some of Iran's activities in the region.
So like a little, quid pro quo.
Yeah, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing.
So that's the carrot and stick approach in a nutshell.
Yeah, more or less.
Is it sustainable, though? Is this a long-term solution?
That's a good question.
Or are we just kind of kicking the can down the road, delaying the inevitable explosion?
It's a question a lot of analysts are grappling with.
It does seem like it could go either way.
Yeah, there are definitely risks involved in this whole arrangement.
Okay, so we've talked about the unspoken understandings, the
Mhm.
carrot and stick approach.
Yeah.
One of the other points that al-Arshani makes is about weakening what he calls traditional threats.
Right.
And specifically, he's talking about Palestinian resistance movements.
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit into all of this?
Well, he's getting at this core objective for both the U.S. and Israel.
Okay,
They want to reshape the Middle East in a way that aligns with their interests.
right.
And they see these Palestinian resistance movements as roadblocks to achieving that goal.
I see. So they're trying to kind of clear the path?
Yeah, exactly. And targeting groups like Hezbollah is a way to neutralize some of the key players in this resistance.
And they're able to do that because, like we said, Hezbollah poses a direct geographic threat to Israel.
Right. It's almost like they're allowed to sacrifice this piece on the chessboard.
Okay, so it all ties back to this unspoken agreement.
Yeah, everything is connected.
But here's something else that struck me in the article.
Mm-hmm.
Al-Arshani points out that the Arab world is largely left out of these U.S.-Iran dealings.
Oh, that's a huge point.
Yeah, it's like these incredibly consequential decisions are being made in secret
Yeah.
without much input from other key players in the region.
Right. It's like they're having this private conversation and the rest of the Middle East is left wondering what's going on.
That seems like a recipe for disaster.
It definitely has the potential to backfire.
Yeah, because what happens when Arab countries are suddenly forced to deal with the fallout of decisions they had no say in making?
That's when you start to see resentment and instability brewing.
And that can lead to all sorts of unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
So it seems like this whole situation is a lot more complicated than it might appear on the surface.
Yeah, there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of potential pitfalls.
Well, this is fascinating stuff, and I think we've only just scratched the surface.
We definitely have a lot more to unpack here.
Okay, so let's dive even deeper into this in our next segment.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've got this shadow diplomacy happening with Israel and Iran kind of maneuvering around each other.
Right.
And the U.S. is kind of like the referee calling the shots.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, the Arab world is kind of getting left out in the cold here.
Yeah.
What does al-Arshani say about what could happen because of that?
He's pretty blunt about it.
Okay.
He says sidelining Arab nations like this, it could really backfire on the U.S.
How so?
Well, think about it. You're a country in the region, and you're suddenly dealing with consequences from decisions you had absolutely no part in making.
Yeah, that's going to feel pretty frustrating.
It's like they're playing a game and the rules keep changing, and you don't even know what the rules are.
Right, you're not even at the table.
Exactly.
But how would that resentment actually play out? Like, what would we see happen?
Well, Arab countries might start looking for ways to assert their own influence. Maybe even challenge the U.S.-led order in the region. They could forge new alliances, strengthen ties with countries like Russia or China.
That's a pretty bold move, though, isn't it? I mean, wouldn't that risk provoking the U.S. even more?
It's a risk, but remember, every nation acts in its own self-interest.
That's true.
And if Arab countries feel like their concerns are being ignored, they're going to look for other options.
So this deterrence balance that al-Arshani talks about,
Right.
this whole system built on unspoken agreements,
Mm-hmm.
seems kind of shaky, doesn't it? Like, what could throw a wrench in the works?
Oh, there are plenty of things.
Like what?
Well, the situation in Yemen could easily spiral out of control and force someone's hand.
Mm-hmm.
Or imagine a sudden change in leadership in Iran or Israel.
Yeah, okay.
That could totally disrupt the existing dynamic.
Yeah, you're dealing with human beings after all.
Exactly. And let's not forget about those unintended consequences.
Right, things you just can't predict.
These backroom deals are so secretive. Who knows what'll happen when something unexpected pops up?
Something those agreements didn't account for.
Right. It's like trying to build a house on sand, one good storm, and the whole thing collapses.
So al-Arshani is saying that ultimately the Arab world loses out in this geopolitical game.
That's his argument.
Do you agree with that? Is there no way for them to turn things around?
It's definitely a possibility, but it's not a foregone conclusion.
Yeah.
Remember, the Arab world is not a monolithic bloc.
Right. There are a lot of different countries with different interests.
Exactly. There's diversity, there are different interests, and there's potential for strategic maneuvering.
So there's still room for them to play the game, maybe even change the rules.
I think so.
Okay, so what would that look like? Give me some hope here.
Well, for starters, they could focus on strengthening regional cooperation.
Okay.
Imagine a united front speaking with one voice on the issues that matter to them.
Yeah, strengthen numbers.
Exactly. That would give them some serious leverage.
But historically, Arab unity has been pretty elusive, hasn't it?
It's true. It's not easy to get everyone on the same page.
So how do they overcome that?
It's not impossible.
Yeah.
There have been moments of cooperation in the past that offer valuable lessons.
Like what?
Well, think about the Gulf Cooperation Council, for instance.
Okay, yeah.
It's not perfect, but it shows that collective action is achievable.
Right, and there are other regional organizations like the Arab League.
Exactly. Maybe it's time to give them a more prominent role in shaping the region's future.
So that's one way to approach it, but is that enough? What else could they do to kind of break free from being pawns in someone else's game?
Here's the key. They need to diversify their partnerships.
Okay.
They can't just rely on the U.S. or any single power for their security or economic well-being.
So forge new relationships, build bridges with other global players.
Exactly. Cultivate those relationships. Create a counterbalance to U.S. influence.
Okay.
It's about playing the diplomatic game smartly and recognizing that they have options.
So we're talking about countries like China, Russia, India, maybe even the European Union.
Exactly. Playing the field a bit strategically.
But wouldn't that risk upsetting the U.S.?
There are always risks in international relations, but it's about managing those risks, not just avoiding them out of fear.
Right.
Look, every country puts its own interests first, And Arab nations have every right to do the same.
That's like that old saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Exactly. They need to be active participants in shaping their own destinies.
So it sounds like there's a real opportunity here for the Arab world to take control of its own narrative.
I think so.
But how would they actually go about doing that? What concrete steps could they take?
Well, Al-Arshani has some ideas.
Okay.
He talks about leveraging their economic power, fostering cultural and scientific exchange, and even promoting a new vision for regional security.
Interesting.
It's about playing the long game, building relationships, and projecting a confident, independent voice on the world stage.
So a more proactive approach, not just reacting to what the U.S., Israel, or Iran do. It sounds like he believes the Arab world has the potential to be a real game changer in the region, not just a pawn in someone else's game.
He definitely sees that potential, but he's also realistic about the challenges.
Okay.
It's going to take more than just talk. It's going to require a fundamental shift in thinking, a willingness to break free from old patterns and embrace a new era of Arab leadership.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, it seems like there's a glimmer of hope amidst all this complexity and uncertainty.
I'd say so.
The situation between Israel and Iran is definitely tense, but the Arab world has the potential to chart its own course.
It's not going to be easy, but it's a story worth watching.
So we've talked about all the risks of this shadow diplomacy thing going on, and how the Arab world could end up kind of getting squeezed out of the whole picture.
Right.
But Al-Arshani doesn't just leave us with, a feeling of doom and gloom, right?
No, he doesn't.
He actually lays out some pretty concrete ideas for how Arab countries can, step up and change the game. So what are some of the highlights? What are some of the things he thinks they can do?
Well, he starts by talking about the economic power that Arab countries have collectively.
Right.
They've got energy resources, they've got strategic trade routes, they've got a growing consumer market.
Right.
He says instead of just being suppliers, they could actually leverage this economic power to set terms and build partnerships that benefit them.
So not just reacting to global market forces, but actually shaping them.
Exactly.
That's a pretty bold idea. But how do you actually make that happen? How do you turn economic muscle into, like, real geopolitical influence?
Well, he suggests a couple of things.
Okay.
First, strengthen internal trade within the Arab world itself.
Okay.
Reduce that reliance on external powers.
That makes sense.
And second, diversify their trading partners.
Okay.
Make deals with countries like China, India, even the EU. And kind of play those relationships off of each other.
So create a little healthy competition. I like it. But beyond just the economic stuff, Al-Arshani also talks about cultural influence, right? Like, how does that fit into the whole equation?
Well, he argues that Arab countries have this incredibly rich cultural heritage that's often overlooked or misrepresented. And he says they should invest in promoting their own narratives, fostering scientific and cultural exchange, building relationships that go beyond just, transactional deals.
So it's kind of like soft power instead of just hard power?
Exactly. It's about winning hearts and minds as well as securing economic and military interests.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
But let's be real for a second.
Yeah.
The Middle East is a pretty volatile place.
It is.
So how do you actually build stability when you know everyone's on edge and you've got all these unspoken agreements hanging over everything?
All right, well, Al-Arshani's vision is definitely ambitious.
Okay.
But he doesn't shy away from the security challenges.
So what does he say? He
proposes this new regional security framework.
Okay.
One that's not reliant on outside powers like the U.S.
Think of it as a system where Arab countries cooperate on defense, intelligence sharing, conflict resolution.
That's a huge undertaking, though.
It is.
Like, that would require a level of trust and coordination that's pretty rare in the region.
It's definitely a long-term goal.
Yeah.
But he argues that the alternative is continued instability.
Right.
And, always being at the mercy of these outside powers. He points to successful examples of regional cooperation in other parts of the world.
Oh, okay.
Showing that it's not just a pipe dream.
So it's kind of like taking inspiration from those success stories.
Right.
Adapting those models to the Middle East.
Exactly. Finding their own path, not just mimicking what others have done.
So it's about recognizing their own strengths and potential, not just focusing on the threats and divisions.
Right.
This is giving me a whole new perspective on the situation.
Good.
It's like, instead of being pawns in someone else's game, Arab countries could actually become the chess masters.
Yeah.
Shaping their own destiny. Exactly. And that's really the key takeaway from all of this. It's not about, predicting the future, but recognizing the agency that Arab countries have. They can choose to be proactive.
Okay.
To assert their interests and to shape the future of the Middle East in a way that benefits them.
So it's a powerful message of empowerment.
It is.
It's not about, guarantees or easy solutions.
No.
But it's about recognizing that they have choices.
Right.
And those choices matter.
Absolutely. It's about, stepping out of the shadows and into the light, shaping their own narrative, and ultimately building a future that reflects their own values and aspirations.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive.
Yeah, it has.
We've gone from, unspoken agreements and geopolitical maneuvering to economic power plays and a vision for a whole new regional order.
It's amazing what one article can spark.
Yeah, it really is. And to our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and to never underestimate the power of ideas to shape our world.
Because ultimately, it's those ideas, those bold visions for the future that have the power to transform our understanding and create a more just and equitable world for all.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring.